Right, talking about the ruling party, it's convening a series of National Executive Committee meetings this weekend. A number of concerns are expected to top the agenda. These meetings come amid the worsening power crisis and other issues crippling the country. I'm joined now by political analyst Sanusha Naidu, just to tell us what we should expect. Sanusha, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. Well, we've been discussing even during the elective conference on a national level last year that sometimes ANC meetings end up being, plagued by factionalism and issues around the ANC instead of issues around South Africa. Are we being unfair, South Africans, to expect them to discuss more about what we're suffering from, even though they're meeting on an ANC basis and not necessarily governance?
Good afternoon, Ms. Sekhru, and good afternoon to the viewers. I'm not sure if we're being unfair. I think we've been disappointed many a time in the past. And so having to listen to the fact that these meetings are happening, and it, of course, on top of the agenda, we're going to hear from the ANC communications people that, the question about load shedding, rectifying the kind of socio-economic crisis, the governance crisis, but also the renewal of the party and how the party is going to do this. I think it's all par for the course, because at the end of the day, they are the ruling party. And I think the real question is, what is going to be substantively the action plan going forward? Now, we've gone back to stage 5 load shedding. We see the generators and the units in different power stations are just completely not able to absorb the capacity, and they're breaking down continuously. And we're hearing a lot of, interesting speculation about whether the grid is going to collapse anytime soon. But of course, the question is, is this kind of doomsday kind of scenarios? But I think ordinary South Africans are just really frustrated. Their levels of distrust are really high. And of course, they're wanting to know that it's not about always talking about what's happening internally in the party and overriding and overshadowing what's the real crisis within the body politic of the state. And the president has a State of the Nation address on the 9th of February. So I think we have to basically watch and see what comes out from these discussions. But we don't want the same kind of rhetoric and the tiresome kind of promises that we don't see any kind of intervention that's going to create any kind of practical solution for ordinary South Africans.
And I mean, I think a lot of South Africans, as you said, about being fatigued and to some extent very despondent. The 9th of February with that State of the Nation address, I think many South Africans, sometimes as journalists, we sit down in the newsroom and we compare this year's State of the Nation address to the previous one. And a lot of what is said is the same things, the same type of, words that are used to diagnose what the country is going through, but nothing is being done. But also, Sanusha, can the country wait until the 9th of February to hear what the president thinks about what's happening now? Shouldn't, a lot of people are saying we need a family meeting. What is he saying about the energy crisis? Yes, he speaks at different areas where he's invited, like your education, Lekgotla, etc. But his own family meeting, South Africans feel as though he's also just not available to the media, for the media to be able to ask him the difficult questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think in a state of national disaster, or where we are currently, where we're beyond a crisis when it comes to the electricity issues in the country. I mean, the issues is quite a soft way to describe it. But I think, the president has to speak to the nation. And I think you're right in a sense that, does he take us in his confidence? And he's known to not do that very often. And I wonder if part of this challenge he has is that it's unclear what he's going to say that's going to be kind of innovative about where we are and what's going to be done and what's the trajectory of the policy planning and the intervention. I don't think, from what I could tell, I can't see that they have any kind of identical power and ideas and innovative ideas and practical ones that's going to take us out of this quagmire. And I think that's a challenge for the president, because we're hearing the same rhetoric, and it's quite hot these days to have this kind of noise pollution and so forth that just doesn't make any sense anymore. But the problem is with this kind of continuous rhetoric is that it says so much and says nothing. So it's all about nothing at the end of the day. And I think to a large extent, I'm beginning to see that there's not much thinking happening on this situation, because I think the problem has become so enormous and gigantic, and it's run away from our policymakers and the kind of planning and the kind of policy instruments that you want, that we're going around in a hot air balloon but getting nowhere.
And of course, we know that other issues within the ANC are probably going to be discussed. We found out that the Public Protector's Office has finally finalized its investigation into Phala Phala. But at the moment, South Africans do care, of course, about what the Public Protector has found. But we care more about what's going to happen with this power crisis. Sanusha, this afternoon, the Reserve Bank is going to be announcing the repo rate. A lot's going on, and we just want to know if at least the power crisis will be sorted. But when you look at that and you look at the fact that January 8th was still an event that the ANC celebrated, etc. They're having all these NECs where they invite the fourth estate, in this case the media, etc. Do you think with celebrations of January 8th and things like that, should this really still be happening? Are they reading the room at the moment in terms of celebrating the ANC while the country is essentially on fire?
No, I don't think they read the room. I don't think they actually understand the gravity of what they are experiencing and what they're facing. I don't think they really appreciate the fact that they've been in this position to govern. And it's not about the fact that you're the oldest liberation movement and political party. It's not about the fact that you've liberated people. I think the real challenge there is, how do you actually take that moment of liberation and make it a long-term value proposition for yourself? And I think these celebrations are muted. I think the people that basically are at these events, etc., where celebrations are happening. Yes, for maybe a 1 or 2 hours, you want a deflection, you want a distraction, but you still go back to your normal reality. And the reality and the new norm in South Africa, in terms of the reality, is that we've got a serious problem around load shedding, a serious problem in terms of cost of living, a serious problem of unemployment, a serious problem of lack of services and lack of delivery of services. We've got a crime crisis in this country. We have a lot of systemic issues that need to be addressed. And so, yes, we can have a celebration, but it doesn't get you away from the crisis of what's currently happening. So I think at the end of the day, the challenge is really on the party and the ruling party to kind of say, well, you know what? How much is it that we have to think about pushing back and trying to navigate the fact that, there's a challenge towards us and people are challenging us? And I think, yes, right now South Africans are more seized because the electricity outage is not just about, whether the lights go off and whether you can navigate that. It's the knock-on impact that has, the snowballing impact that it has on food prices, what we're seeing in the poultry industry, what we're seeing in terms of small business, what we're seeing in terms of people's livelihoods. I mean, for me to be online now, I've got to make sure I have an inverter and two backup batteries. And even then, I get load shedding, which essentially kicks me off and I can't do my work. So if that's what I'm experiencing as a middle-class individual, imagine the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized.